This is State of Exile, episode 25 with Nick GGG, game designer.
How's it going?
Perfect.
We're really happy to have you come on board. You know, last week we postponed it just to make sure we had a really good show, and I'm glad you agreed to come on and do this kind of thing, Nick. It's freaking awesome. So, in case you guys don't know what Nick does at GGG, we're going to give Nick here a moment or two to describe exactly what he does. So, Nick, what do you do over there at Grinding Your Games?
We all do a little bit of everything. My particular roles tend to focus on unique design as well as a little bit of item balance. I also work a lot on new leagues quite early on, and the last few months I've been mainly focusing on PvP balance as well.
Makes sense with the recent PvP patch as well.
Yeah.
And this pretty much is a jack of all trades is what I'm getting at here.
That's like indie devs in general, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. The team knows a little bit of everything.
That's freaking awesome. So,
That's pretty cool the way it works.
So what I really wanted to discuss with you today is, because you have such a broad knowledge on the game itself, we're going to actually spend around 20 minutes on each segment. We're going to do unique design, we're going to do league design, as well as PvP plans for the future. If you don't mind deliberating some of those things. Sure. Let's kick it off with unique design. So obviously the Diamond Supporter Pack doesn't really exist anymore, but $1,000 Supporter Pack still does, where people can purchase a unique. First thing I want to come out the gate is, how backed up are you guys on that?
We do have a list. I don't know the exact number because it changes, but there is a bit of a waiting list. We tend to be pretty good about, like, when someone contacts us, we'll immediately start the process. Some people like to wait quite a long time to start the process, and some people will start the process and then drop off completely for a couple months and then pick it back up. So it's really hard to say how backed up we are, because there's probably a good 100 people who are in some part of the process. I don't know if there are that many who just haven't started at all, but there is a list.
Yeah.
And
it's quite a long process, having gone through it myself, and going through designing a community unique as well. There's a lot of back and forth, and it can take quite a long time, especially if you're trying to figure out what can and can't work in terms of especially the unique mods that add new things to the game. Some of those can be quite difficult. It's like, we could do this, but I don't actually know if this can be work. We'll go talk to the coders for a while first.
There's a lot of people often have some really cool ideas, and we just can't do them because they won't work with our systems, or they won't play well with latency, or they don't work with other uniques that exist. So a lot of the early process is just finding what we can do and then building around that.
Yeah, at the time, Hegemony, I'm sure you're more than aware with him, when he was trying to make his unique, he was trying to make a wand initially that did something with power charges. I remember him explaining the whole desync with charges. It displays them on your screen, but they're not actually there because it's a certain client. I can imagine that kind of nightmare being pretty popular when people want to make uniques, things like that.
Yeah, and I really liked that idea, and I really wanted to find a way to do that. But at the end of the day, if your screen says you've got power charges and you shoot your wand and there's all these fireworks that are flying all over the screen, but the server's like, oh, you did one projectile and it hit thing, and that was the end of it.
Yep.
And on the server, one thing dies, and your client, everything should be dead. You're going to feel pretty disappointed with your item.
Yeah, that's really important too. Customer satisfaction. Just making sure the product they put out isn't like this big disheartening fireworks, like you said, and then nothing comes out at all. Now, in terms of the unique design, if someone, let's say today, were to say, "Hey, Nick," or "Hey, GGG, I'm interested in purchasing unique," they go through the support section. To the best of my knowledge, they go with support. They do their $1,000, and then they directly become in contact with you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, from start to finish, if someone had a pretty well-balanced idea that we were able to execute, decently, what was the average time frame would you say unique would come out once it's, ready to go?
If the idea is really simple, simple to implement, and they've got a clear idea of what they want for the art and for the flavor, it can take like 2 or 3 weeks. Greed's Embrace, which just came out in the last patch, took about 3 weeks, I'd say. The only problem was seeing like what values we could give for the item rarity and quantity, because it was on a slot that we haven't put it on before.
Right.
And that was the most complicated part of that item. And once we had sort of settled on a good value and decided that the downsides are adequate. It was like just art was made, flavor was signed off on, it was in the game next patch.
Wow, that's really quick.
Wow.
So that was pretty much like the guy had like pretty much everything he wanted.
Yep.
Listed out, and it was just about a matter of balancing.
Yeah, it didn't require like huge amount of testing because we wanted to make sure the quantity and rarity was great, but it wasn't anything that was going to break the game in terms of like crashes or weird conflicts. So it was really fast. That one was really fast. Carcass Jack was another really fast one.
Yeah, I really like the Unique too. So solid.
Yeah.
No, okay, Pox.
I was gonna say that's crazy thing that Carcass was like such a supposedly quick design unique, and it's like so popular in terms of like the go-to chest until you get something else. That's really nice.
Yeah, a lot of the fast ones turn out really well, we find, because they are very clear cut and they fill a role, and that usually that is a good indicator that players want it.
All right, so something I wanted to ask about with uniques, people always assume there's a drawback. Now, I know that some uniques get released without a drawback. Does that usually net them a higher rarity tier, or is it just something you guys encourage a drawback on a unique? How does that exactly work?
It's on a case-by-case basis. A drawback isn't necessary for a unique at times. If a drawback is usually there to limit an aspect of the power that the item can achieve, like Queen of the Forest, for example, has that movement speed drawback to really sort of limit how much movement speed you can get without investing in evasion. So that's an example of a drawback which is necessary. But then there's Dream Feather, for example, which uses a similar evasion scaling mechanic, doesn't have a strong drawback, because for you to really get the most damage out of that, evasion is only part of the puzzle.
Right, that makes sense.
Then there's like Mjolnir, for example, whose the drawback is more about drawing your focus away from spell damage on the tree, because you have to get all those strength nodes, which is in itself sort of limiting the power in an interesting way. But it's not mandatory for unique to have a drawback, and we usually take it on a case-by-case basis to see what the exploit case is and if there's a way to mitigate that crazy edge case without ruining the item for everybody else.
It seems like drawbacks often a case of promoting investment, so they have to invest in something in order to make it usable.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
I noticed that another drawback, like when I was going through the process, was also opportunity cost that you have to consider as well. With so many other uniques being in the game and with you guys releasing uniques all the time, that can often be a drawback in itself. Is like, well, there's other items you could use in this. Like we were, for the community unique, for example, we're talking about potentially doing some gloves, and we said like some of the drawback could be the opportunity cost of not being able to use Malagaras, so not being able to get a heap of crit on your gloves. So that's kind of, I guess, another thing you guys can play with as well there.
That's right, and we look at the specific slot. For example, in amulets are really good for increasing global defenses and for resistances. And so, if a unique doesn't have defenses or resistances, that in itself is a drawback for an amulet. So we take all that into consideration.
I personally use my amulets for like crit damage, cast speed, crit chance,
more
accuracy, more offensive.
Yeah, an amulet is a really quite a catch-all slot. So any sort of stats we put on that are going to limit in some way, right?
Correct. Yeah. That new unique, the new necklace you guys have. It seems like it's an extremely rare, tier. The new time clasp. No, that's the Moonstone. The
Rash Kaldors.
Yes, that guy.
Yeah.
That is a. I don't know. Was that a GGG or was that a support?
That was a supporter unique.
That was a supporter unique. That thing is. It's hard for me to be like. I don't know. It's just like you can't be mad at it, but you try to find a build that would be good around, and it's not like. I don't know. Whoever thought up that idea, I think, did a really good job, and I'm not sure if the rarity tier was is in a good spot, but. I do feel like I want to get one of those at one point in time. I just know it's going to cost me a pretty penny. Or 1,000 race points.
Sure, it's a pretty solid. You're thinking of the one with the chance to ignite and freeze and shock?
The life leech rate, the mana leech rate, the attack speed.
Okay.
You're talking about a different one.
Warp Timepiece.
Yeah, Warp Time.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
That was a GGG one. That was myself and Neon / Mark II, depending on what you know him as. And actually, I think Carl had a little bit of input on that one as well. Yeah, we're pretty proud of that one. It's good, but you are giving up life and defenses and resistances. You're purely getting like offensive stats and a means to a defense through that lead trade.
Yep.
So it's an interesting one.
The next thing I wanted to bring up was this one isn't so much as creating unique, but as in terms of unique balance. This past patch, in 1.3 release, we saw a nerf to Lightning Coil and Cloak of Defiance, right? That was 1.3 release? Yeah. With those being nerfed, the thought process behind that, I'm not sure if you had too much hand in, but Cloak of Defiance, what got nerfed was the 10% mana reduction got removed. But really what makes Cloak of Defiance good is you don't have to pick up Mind Over Matter. And then Lightning Coil, what got nerfed on it wasn't that Lightning Coil needed nerfed. We kind of felt like Armor needed a buff. And then Taste for Hate came out, and it was kind of like, why nerf this and then release this Flask? Things like that, the community really wanted to know some justification on. Do you have any insight on why things like that happened when, there could have been other answers for that?
There's a bunch of different reasons. In the case of Cloak of Defiance, the efficiency there is that you really don't have to get Mind Over Matter. And having that additional bonus on there just ultimately felt unnecessary. I mean, it made it very, very good to the point that why would you ever get the Keystone? Because there's a chest that is better than the Keystone and also a great chest. So it didn't really make sense. And we're also keeping an eye on a lot of those uniques still. In the case of Lightning Coil, that's another case. I mean, its strength is... It was really undervalued when it came out, and there were very few people who saw the power it had.
Oh, yeah.
And it took a while for people to figure it out, and then they figured it out in a big way. And it became very dominant, and I would say too dominant. We are also looking at armor as a defense. We're looking at all the defenses, really. I mean, Act 4 is going to be a big opportunity to look at, like, the balance of the entire game from an item perspective and from a base stats perspective, even.
Oh, wow.
So...
Sounds like you guys are planning a little bit of a big shake-up.
Can't say anything. But we are... I mean, it's just a good opportunity for us to look at all of that. I wouldn't discount armor yet. And I think even now on armor...
I don't discount armor even now.
Yeah, it's a very good stat if you know how to utilize it and how it works.
It's just not in vogue anymore. It's not cool.
That's right. Like, nothing's really changed. About, like, a year ago, armor was the be-all, end-all.
Path of Armor.
And no one got evasion, and not a whole lot changed, and it's flipped. So...
Yep.
Yeah.
That's meta, though. That is meta.
Yeah. But it's just sort of strange that, people hate armor. It's the same.
Honestly, armor's actually received some pretty good changes. If you passively keep up some endurance charges or even go Immortal Call, as well as the new Soul of Steel node, that node is so good. 4% flat. Armor it's not as bad as people make it out to be. It's just Lightning Coil and Evasion was so good for so long, as well as
there are some very, very good body armors that seem to conflict with armor, I would say.
Yes.
So keep an eye on everything. Make changes where necessary.
I think the body armor slot in terms of unique balancing and that is a very interesting slot because at the moment and for a while now it's been the case that it's pretty much unique or bust in the chest slot. Like there's very little attraction for taking a rare a lot of the time. In very few cases is that a better option. How have you guys I'm guessing you guys have been thinking about that. Any sort of thoughts around that?
We have been thinking about that, and that it's kind of a tricky obstacle now. I'd say Energy Shield is one of the very few cases at the moment where it's worth getting a rare because there aren't uniques that have crazy high Energy Shield values, and it's a substitute for life. I think that crafting has helped a little bit, but not enough. In that you can get some mods that you can't get on a rare normally, and you can't get on a unique currently. But that's one avenue we can look at for improving the state of rare body armors. But I would agree that right now I think unique body armors are probably too dominant. Yeah.
There's something. Go ahead, Pops.
I was going to say, I would say the biggest, I think, hurdle right now is the only reason to use a chest piece aside from like the energy shield would be resistances. Because if you want clear speed, you've got like Carcass, which gives you AoE, for example. If you want defensive purposes, you've got, just prime example, Belly gives you maximum health with a little bit of resist, a little bit of stats. The Mind Over Matter chest, the Cloak of Defiance, gives you Mind Over Matter. So I'd say that's the biggest hurdle right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, there are a lot of chests that are just generally really good, and that's kind of the problem, I think, because it's hard to get a generally really good rare in that way.
But on the same token, you have like Hiri's Ire, it gives you acrobatics, but it doesn't give you all the cool stuff behind it, and it's an evasion chest, so you're already next to aggro, so you should just get aggro.
We've got also, even within the body armors, we've got this tier of like the great body armors and the body armors that at this point mostly get ignored, and Hiri's Ire is an example of that.
I mean, when it first came out, it was like you didn't have all the extra doodads behind acrobatics. Acrobatics was no armor, no ES. I mean, it was like completely different. So things like that obviously need to be changed over time. And you guys have a huge laundry list, and I understand you'll get to it when you get to it.
Yeah.
I do want to state, on terms of Hiri's Ire being like almost not ever used, there is actually a decent use for Hiri's Ire.
Here we go.
If you're constructing like a summoner, for example, and you're using an unset ring, and you have a spot open for an Animate Guardian, Hiri's Ire is not too bad of a chess piece since it's like 1 chaos. You throw it on, your guy automatically has acrobatics now.
That's a good point.
So
yeah,
that's what I used to use it for. It's 1 chaos for free acrobatics on Animate Guardian.
I just got put in my place.
Yeah.
Thanks, Box.
And before prices go up.
On the topic of your like list of uniques that are mostly go ignored, the game is pretty rapidly changing, and meta shifts quite a lot, and things will eventually just become kind of useless in the current meta. Like uniques that were designed, a year or two ago, and I imagine like in a year's time, there's going to be even more and more uniques like that. Do you guys have plans to kind of go back and revise and redesign old uniques to keep all right, we had this original concept that doesn't work in the game anymore. How can we kind of modernize that, bring a version 2 out?
A couple weeks ago, we had a talk about internally. We talked about just making a list of all the uniques and looking at them one by one, and seeing what could change. So we are looking at basically everything right now. Even then, though, we've got a lot of uniques that are really old that are still very much used all the time.
Oh yeah,
Kaum's is really old.
Yep.
Imaginoid's Girdle.
Yeah, that's another great example.
Yeah, some are just timeless, aren't they?
Yeah, and on top of that, even the items that sort of shift out of the meta, we can introduce new items that work really well with them.
Yeah.
And allow people to make those connections and sort of start to build around them again. So we've got a few options for reinvigorating the older items.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because even if an item's not useful now, who's to say that in a couple of patches' time it won't become useful again, and you didn't even really need to change it in the first place? So
that's right. Yeah.
That's really cool. I like that idea. Actually, now that I think about it, complementing another unique.
Yeah, we do that a little bit. It's pretty subtle, though.
I know you guys like the idea of the Magic the Gathering style balancing cycle, or the meta cycle, where things shift in and out, and it's okay to have things that aren't good or aren't popular at a certain time because it keeps the game interesting. If Fire's terrible this season, but next season Fire's good, then people play different builds and try different things. So I guess uniques can kind of fall into that as well.
It does a little bit. I don't know how much we try to actually encourage and discourage builds. We try to just sort of keep things from becoming totally dominant. In the case of Flame Blast, that was there were just too many people playing Flame Blast because it was too good. I think the meta sort of happens more naturally than that. A lot of people, if someone makes a clever build with an old skill, people will just follow that build naturally, and then builds will build around that. And that's how we see the meta shift a lot. We don't really need to input that much to change the meta.
now that we're on meta discussion, you get all these players making cool, edgy names such as Buzzsaw and Shatterchuck. Do you guys use that around the office too?
Occasionally. Buzzsaw is used just because it's a really good way to describe rapidly what it is. Yeah. Shatterchuck, not so much.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's kind of cool how the community itself names it, and then the company who creates it then starts using the flavors that they make. Things like that are pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Confirm Shatterchuck not good enough.
Not good enough.
Not good enough. Sorry,
Off your name and game, son.
Oh man. I think, do you guys have any other questions you'd like to talk about unique design before we go into our next plan?
I'd like to kind of go over the recent. So with the recent PvP patch, the PvP patch, there was a big of PvP uniques.
Yep.
So especially a lot of stuff for low level dueling. I've heard mixed things. When I first saw them, I thought, oh, these are all these all seem pretty cool. They're gonna be make PvP pretty dynamic. It's going to be things a lot of them were kind of soft counters to things. So someone's very shock heavy, you can chuck on this one and become a little bit more resilient against that. And there's a lot of things. It looked like a lot of even promoting item swapping out to counter people and stuff like that. How do you guys feel like that has gone? How do you feel like those uniques have gone? Whether they've made their way into PvP? What have you learned from that, etc.?
So I think there are a couple elements there. There were some soft counters introduced, and those were introduced pretty pointedly. Time Clasp, for example, is a soft counter to the really dominant temporal chains meta. I mean, at that time, I don't know if there were any builds other than maybe Phase Breakers one that wasn't using temp chains as their primary curse. And we nerfed temp chains at its core against players, and then on top of that introduced a ring that would further reduce the effects of it on a player wearing that ring. The mere existence of that ring and the nerf to the core of the skill, I think combined have made temp chains a riskier choice. It doesn't require players to use the item for the item to have an effect in PvP. Just having that item around will change players' choices. Then there are a lot of other items that were introduced more as stepping stones to PvP. For example, Prism Weave is not. It's not meant to be an amazing belt. It's not meant to be the top tier belt for PvP. It is meant to be a stepping stone for a PvP elemental build. If you wanted to make one.
Brutally honest about Prism Weave, it's used for Vicious a lot. People are just using for the Vicious recipe. I see it all the time.
That's true as well. We specifically wanted to introduce a rare rustic, a unique rustic sash because we needed one. There was one before.
That explains why it's an elemental belt on a physical base.
Yep. You see them in trade all day. People just buying them for 1 alch, 1 Cassie to craft their PvP weapon, which is really cool. Sure. So it not only is it a PvP unique, which I don't know if too many people use it in elemental build, but it's definitely being used for Vicious. I can assure that.
The other one is Reverberation Ward is a really good wand if you're just getting into PvP, and it's also great for leveling. But there are much better rare wands out there. They just take a lot of time and money to craft. So until you have that, I think Reverberation Ward is a really good placeholder.
So now, you know what? Now that we're on the discussion, let's talk PvP. We can do the league segment at the end. Let's talk PvP.
Actually, I want to ask him one question. I thought that was kind of cool.
Sure.
Could you go over some of the? Remember how we were talking about how some mechanics of designing unique just cannot work with the engine? Could you talk about just a few of them that people submitted that you thought were really cool that just won't work?
Oh, it's a tricky one. I know there's Liralai, who had it was Dreamfeather was his unique. His initial idea had been to give it was much more complicated, and there was a Camouflage Predator mod on there. Do you remember the Nemesis mod?
Oh,
Camouflage
wow.
Predator? He wanted to have the player granted Camouflage Predator under certain circumstances, and that is risky. It has rendering problems, and it's kind of unclear, and it was really strong. And so, but the main problem was that the effect was just buggy. So giving players that on and off all the time was going to cause problems. Oh, yeah. The hegemony one you brought up earlier was a good example. And then another one when we were talking about his staff, his idea had basically been like a strong knockback staff. And I thought, what if the knockback itself was powered by the power charges that you're getting? So the more power charges you had, the further you would knock things back, which is sort of an interesting balance mechanism, because at some point you have too many to really sustain your damage.
Yeah.
But that's another weird one. It causes some desync. You think you're knocking it in one direction, but you're actually knocking it in another, and the longer the knockback distance is, the more out of sync you'll get with that. There's two examples.
That's pretty cool, though.
I might be actually talking to you soon. I'm planning on making a crit sword, Nick.
Okay, we've had some struggles with a crit sword before.
Oh, no.
I'm interested to hear your idea.
Okay, well, do you mind if I fly it out?
Go for it.
Okay,
yeah,
it's a fencing foil. I wanted to have the Picacario base, which is a 1.5 or 1.55 base, and I wanted originally a Harpy Rapier, but they're too slow, so I wanted the crit multi that you get on the inputs in the Harpy Rapier just to be added to the sword itself. Okay. The difference between the two, and then I want it to be minus 20% AOE plus 5% AOE per frenzy charge crit, and then kind of like the PDPS around the Beanos.
Okay. So what's the end goal of this item?
To receive a lot of AoE and to have a crit sword. So like Reverse, you could wield it as Cleave. Cleave really doesn't have a good crit sword, you can't go daggers with it.
So I see a couple things that would raise red flags from us, from a balance perspective. The potential to get a huge amount of AoE, because you can dual wield these.
Yes.
So any frenzy charge could count twice. So if you've got minus 20 and then you've got 5% per frenzy, you'd be looking at like potential of about 25 or 30% per sword. So you'd be looking at like 60% increased AoE just from your weapons, which is kind of ridiculous.
Maybe make it so it can't be dual wielded. Boom, flag done.
I'm also not sure if we can do negative AoEs on some skills.
Conk Effect has something like that?
Yeah, Conk Effect is fine, but there might be situations where if you have Conk Effect and then further negatives, you get to like 100% reduced.
Oh.
And that would be problematic.
I see. So just breaking the game in general, I would have to work.
Yeah, we'd have to check into some of the exploit cases there. But overall, I think an AoE sword has potential. Per power charge makes it a bit...
frenzy per frenzy.
Iffy. Per frenzy, sorry, yeah. Frenzies aren't really about AoE, which is another thing we'd have to figure out if it works that way, because it's off flavor, as we'd say.
Yeah.
That's true.
So there's a lot of different aspects we'd have to discuss.
This is good to know.
Single target themed, isn't it?
These are all good
think
things.
about that.
Just breaking the game in general, and you have to think about. I mean, that is the world you live in.
Yes. Yeah. There are some hard numbers on certain skills and certain stats that if we ever reach them, things break. So you have to be really careful about.
Maybe if you got to negative AoE Reeve, it would start becoming a black hole and sucking monsters into it.
Or you're just hitting yourself in the face.
It's shooting behind you.
Yeah.
It'd be a custom damage taken build. Perfect.
Let's see. This is good to know. This is good. Like me just spitting off the idea is actually pretty good for people who are interested in purchasing a unique in the future.
Yeah.
I know you guys aren't advertising it, but they do still offer the service. It's $1,000 U.S. currency, U.S. dollars.
Yes.
And you can purchase a unique, and you go through with Nick here, and you can get all that set up. So let's go into that whole PvP meta we were discussing. So let's come out of the gate swinging. Overall, how would you rate Season 1? I understand it was testing everything and really just getting your feelers involved with PvP and an action RPG. How would you rate your success with it?
I'd say it was pretty good. I'd say it was a big improvement on what PvP had been before. Before, there had only been a few very strong builds, and they were much stronger than every other build. There was a huge gap between the top builds and the next set of builds, and there were only a few top builds. I think we saw in the Invitational, there was like almost everybody had a unique build, which is a great sign. There was like 16 or so competitors, and I'd say we probably had 9 or 10 unique builds, which is much healthier than it was 5 months ago. I would say that as the primary balancer, balance still needs some work. It's not perfect yet, and I don't know if it'll ever be perfect because it's very hard to assess balance in a game where people's stats can change on the fly. You always have to look at the top player and say, are they winning because they have an awesome build, or is it because their gear outclasses everybody else, or is it a combination? Are they an excellent player?
They could have like multiple gear sets and they're just really flexible as well.
That's right, and they could also just be very skillful in ways that a lot of players aren't or don't realize. One element of PvP skill is quickly swapping items, and that can make a huge difference in a competitive fight. Someone could be very good with their character, and then you could have someone who's equally good with their character, but also knows how to swap out their gems and items really quickly, and the person who knows how to swap that quickly is probably going to win. So it's hard to assess balance in PvP. That said, I think it was a big improvement over what it was, and I think Season 2 hopefully should be better. I'm carefully assessing it. The season's just started, I think. On the weekend we had our first events, and the ladder's all being reset, so I want to make sure that there's no crazy dominant skills. I'm keeping an eye on puncture, for example, puncture traps. But I'd say Season 1 overall, pretty good. It could be better.
A good start. How are you feeling it's gone with uptake on PvP, like new people getting into PvP? Because it's pretty niche and difficult to get into in action RPGs.
Yeah, the uptake hasn't been as good as I personally wanted to see. And part of that is that it is niche, and it looks a lot harder to get into than it actually is.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
And the matchmaking isn't going to work immediately. Our matchmaking system works really well, but you need to play a bunch of matches to be put into the skill bracket that you actually are suited for.
Yeah, it needs to kind of find your skill level first. That's
right. And that can be very discouraging for players who jump in and they play 3 matches and they lose all 3 matches really badly. When that's the case, that sucks.
Now that we're on the topic of it, queue times. Queue times have been a big issue. Is that partly why the reason you did combine Torment and Bloodlines?
Yes. Yep, that's the main one. We want a healthier PvP population, and people who keep losing match after match after match, it's often because they're playing against the same person, and there's only one other person in the queue even close to their skill level. So merging the brackets, merging the 2 leagues, it just means there's going to be more people to play against. Bloodlines, you'd usually be alone in the queue, maybe have 1 or 2 other people. Torment's a lot more active, so...
That makes a lot of sense to me. Like, it's as I said, such a niche thing already to segregate the community even further. It's making it, like, just more difficult, I think, overall.
And, obviously that left a salty taste in some people's mouths, and some people even complaining, Brutus sprinklers and Torment only, and then I'm playing a Bloodlines character I spent months on gearing. Things like this, I can definitely see where some people have a salty taste in their mouth. But overall, the goal is to actually grow PvP here. So in the big scheme of things, it makes more sense for them to combine the 2 leagues.
Sounds like a reasonable sacrifice to me.
It is unfortunate for those people who geared in both leagues. I did kind of feel for them, and I'm sure you guys did over there too, but you have to look at the big picture. You want PvP to grow. If you care that much to gear both of your characters in both leagues, you should be caring that they're trying to grow PvP more by doing this. At least that's my take on it.
I mean, I do totally commiserate with people who geared out 2 characters, and it is kind of crummy timing. We probably should have announced it a little bit sooner. That's on us, but I think that overall the joy levels will be higher because there'll be more people to play against.
Yeah.
You're going to have more opponents, you're going to have a fresher scene.
Will you guys be avoiding like uniques in specific leagues that could have a big impact on PvP, especially low-level dueling?
I will be keeping an eye on things from this point, yeah. the Brutus's Lead Sprinkler, that was a unique I designed, and that was before we had made the decision to merge the 2 leagues. It's a good weapon. I don't think it's going to really give Torment a huge edge because maces in general aren't that used in PvP. They're slower. They can't. I mean, there's no block penetration of a tree for them, for example. So swords are often chosen over maces. But it is a good weapon. On the other hand, Bloodlines has a great freezing ring. So freeze is pretty good in PvP too.
Very true.
It's pretty funny after that Freeze Pulse Trapper dominated. I mean, like, absolutely dominated.
Lord Sidro? Yeah. Very good.
I saw a pretty quick nerf after that.
Traps in general, I think, needed to be nerfed.
Oh, yeah.
And Freeze Pulse, that the slight nerf to Freeze Pulse was partially because of how good it was, but mostly, I mean, it was good in LLD, but it was quite dominant on HLD as well. So
it's funny. Something that's people love that skill. I mean, I've always loved Freeze Pulse. It's very risky in PvE because you have to be closer up in PvP. You're like, screw it, let's shotgun them, and it's so glorious. I love that skill. The nerfs it's received though in PvP, I've been paying attention to patch notes. It's like almost every patch is just another slash to Freeze Pulse or traps.
It's a good skill. It's also really tricky to use though, so yeah, should be valued.
Absolutely.
Back on the topic of like uptaking PvP and getting new people into it. There's sort of two areas I think that I'd like to ask about. The first is pre-made characters. There's been quite a bit of discussion about them. Obviously, they're pretty bad. Like, they're not designed to be good. But have you guys considered... I think we had a PvP episode a couple weeks ago where we talked with some of the PvP guys and they suggested giving them, like, Tier 2 or Tier 3 gear. Like better gear, but not the best gear.
Mm-hmm. We have talked about it a little bit. It's a tough decision because pre-mades are intended to be a very quick and easy way to make a PvPer. They're not meant to be the best way to make a PvPer. You're meant to swap the gear out quite quickly after you make one. You're meant to look at it and go, oh, I've got stuff that's better than this. I'll just swap in my sword and my shield and my helmet and I'll be good to go. The point was more to make it so you didn't have to level up to 28 every time you went to PvP. So I think giving them much better gear, while it might be helpful in the short term for people who really want to get into PvP, it also tends to limit the builds they'll make with those characters. Because for us to give them the gear, we have to choose what build they're going to be.
Yeah.
And right now, they've sort of got all-rounder-ish builds with a couple skills that you can swap in and out. And the gear doesn't really clearly illustrate which direction they need to go in for them to work. So for us to narrow it down a little bit more, I think would be potentially unhealthy, because then you're going to have the same 7 pre-mates all the time. And it's going to be, I think players will feel even more discouraged to level up and build their own PvPer, because they're going to look at that gear and they go, I don't actually have anything better than this right now. I just got to level 28, and this character is way better than the character I've got. So why bother touching any of the gear?
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I wonder if like having maybe like a larger list of pre-mates with more build options and stuff would be helpful. That would, like, maybe just had like some items with life and resists on them, like just the very basic of basic.
Yeah, so we definitely want to increase the list of pre-mates. The other side of this is we want the pre-mates to be balanced against each other, so we can do all pre-mate events, where it really is just like the most bare bones, poor blue item characters, and it's totally about skill, but it's skill within this narrow bracket because you've only got these gems.
Speaking of that, it's been a lot of people, the PvPers out there, they like gearing up their character, they like, min-maxing, things like that, but there is a lot of people that want to get into PvP, but they feel they can't compete with that, especially when it was in Standard and Hardcore, let's be honest, with legacy items, like face breakers and stuff. Now, do you guys ever have plans in the future, if you can't discuss this, it's understandable, to make like you get like 1,000 currency, for example, and you could buy different pieces of gear, or just choose a set to your knowledge that anybody has a choice of. Not necessarily blue items on a PvP character, but
my suggestion a couple weeks ago was to have like a Descent Champions style PvP event where people kind of get to browse a shop initially and pick some items and then jump into it with those items from the shops. Everyone has a selection from the same pool of gear, and that's what it would take to get me into PvP. If you made that, I would start PvPing.
Same here.
We haven't talked about anything specific like that, but we have talked about certain events and game types, which will very much level the playing field. You might have a blank character to start with, and you might do a Descent Champions run and pick up gear along the way, and by the time you get to the end, that's when you're going to PvP. So it would be sort of like a PvP race hybrid potentially, or we've discussed drafting, I think, a little bit in the past, and we're looking at options for that as well. But nothing's concrete yet, and there's a lot of design and implementation that has to go into both of those.
Yeah, that would take a bit of work to create a Descent Champion style PvP thing.
We need to basically make sure there's enough demand for it as well. Like, we don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on something that players are going to go, I think I'd rather do this other thing.
I mean, I'm going to be brutally honest. I mean, you guys are smart. You can see this, but like a majority of the community is like, I have no interest in PvPing ever. I just want to keep PvEing. Why are we talking PvP? This is an action RPG. It's a loot-based game. And you get all that kind of stuff, but yet you guys are still investing a lot of time in it. Do you think like the time you're investing is totally worth it, and you're going to attract more of these PvEers? I mean, this is
we don't.
Go ahead.
Well, the goal is to attract a lot more PvPers. We don't actually invest that much time into it. As far as like staff are concerned, it's basically me and occasionally a programmer, and occasionally another designer, basically. So in terms of man hours, it's not that many. The goal is to get it into a good enough state that we can minimize the amount of time we have to spend babysitting it. But that said, like, races are also in a similar state where, like, there are a lot of people who don't race, but there are also a lot of people who are very committed racers, and we want to make sure that those people are well served by our game.
I see this PvP patch as you guys laying a groundwork so that the PvP community can kind of grow on its own.
That's the goal. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, do you guys have any other, Pox, do you have any questions about PvP before we go on?
No, I've just been thinking that Freeze Pulse Trapper kind of got me going now.
No, my God. For PvE, though.
No, I want to try it. Throwing a Freeze Pulse Trap?
The shotgun with the more multi... I mean, this guy dominated. Yeah. He dominated.
I've been, like, staring at my screen just trying to prevent myself from building it right now.
Props to that build, for sure. Well,
it's a good build.
So, in terms of Season 2, before we go out, do you guys have any goals in mind that you would like to achieve with Season 2?
I would like to see a healthy mix of Bloodlines and Torment characters in each tournament, like towards the top. I'll be pretty bummed if one of those sides starts to dominate. Unless it's Bloodlines. No, I'm kidding.
And that Brutus Sprinkler, you really don't want that sucker everywhere. We're going to see a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I don't know. I haven't seen that many at the top end.
Really?
They're great. It's a really good entry-level mace, for sure. But I don't know if it's going to be competitively good. Because it's not fast. You need like a really fast weapon.
Yeah. It's not fast, and Molten Strike did just get a hit. Molten Strike was really popular, as was Cyclone.
Yep.
So they're just supposed to receive a hit.
Yeah. I'd also just like to see a lot of participation, basically. If we can see just a lot of players, that'd be great.
Shall we talk some about League design then, Zeno?
Yeah, let's talk League design. All right. So let's just say, did you have any part in the leagues before this? You know, Beyond and Rampage.
I did. Yes. I also I had just started working at GGG 3 weeks before Invasion came out.
Okay. And that's what you were hired to do?
Sacrifice of the Vile, didn't you?
I was hired to do basically what I'm doing now. But they really needed someone to make invasion monsters when I first arrived, so that's what I ended up doing.
Oh man. Oh, okay. So you did Invasion. You did Beyond.
Beyond, I designed basically all of the monsters, and then Mark II/Neon helped balance them.
I will say the Beyond bosses, I think, are some of the most balanced bosses, with the exception of Host. Screw that guy. But like, I mean, those bosses, you're like, no joke. You feel like, you know, like when you see like Living Blood, for example, you're like, whatever, for the most part. Mm-hmm. And then when you see like the Beyond bosses, you're like, legitimately could be scared, or at any point in time you could die to them. I really like that. So
yeah, I spent quite a while trying to get them just scary enough, but not too deadly. So that's a fine line to try and find in this game.
The last question I have: did you design Phylacteral Link?
I did.
Oh no! Pitchforks! Burn the witch!
Get your pitchforks out.
I love that one. It's so good.
Oh man, I'm sure like every time you see that on the forums, you're like, oh my god.
No, I totally get why people hate it, but that's why I love it, because it changes the way they play the game. You can't now just, you know, balls to the wall, race through a map. You have to, if Phylacteral Link pack comes, you have to decide if you're gonna, like, you know, carefully figure out, you know, how you're gonna take it down, or if you're just gonna skip it. If it's a tough pack, you know, you might have to fight it, and then you have to be careful. You can't just hold down right click and leech yourself to full life all the time against that pack. It's an interesting dynamic compared to a lot of what's in the game right now.
Basically, Nick's saying you actually have to be good, guys. I like how chat's like blowing up right now, and one guy's like, I like Phylacteral Link.
That one guy.
Just one guy in there.
You know, P-Link, it's extremely frustrating. I'm hoping it's another one of those Thorn Shrines, Camouflage Predators to be forever forgotten about. Hint, hint. But I will say, for the most part, Bloodlines is really fun. The bombs, they could be a little desyncy. You can explode to those. Freaking Otherworldly. Otherworldly's a perfect example, in my opinion, of balance, where there's past leagues you ignore Chaos Res. This league, you're like, I need Chaos Res. I really like that.
Yeah, I like that pack a lot. It's also, it provides that scary moment when you go all shadowy and you're cornered or whatever. You can't fight your way out necessarily, so...
Yes.
I like this a lot.
Oh, P-Link. Forever the scorn of this game. It's okay, Nick. It's okay. I will say, did you have a hand in with buffing the Pulse Bloods? Because, like, me personally, I haven't really noticed any damage buff from them at all.
I didn't buff them.
Okay.
I think that might have been a Neon choice. Those are a weird one, though, because it's pretty rare that you're going to feel the effects of them, because they have to surround you usually.
Yep.
So it's a pretty situationally dangerous pack, as opposed to a pretty persistent threat like Otherworldly is. But like any league, we have threats on the low end where you don't really have to be that scared of them all the time, and then you've got these really scary ones at the high end. Where you're,
like shared boon dischargers, and you cry every time you see that powerful crit shared boon discharger.
Yep.
I think Beyond overall was balanced pretty well. In terms of Torment, did you have any hand at all in Torment?
Torment, I helped with a lot of the initial ghost designs and some of the initial concepting as well. I think Keepers of the Trove wasn't mine, but I really like that pack. Or that
sorry, I want to take credit for it.
not Keepers of the Trove, the Tormented Thief, rather. I really like that one.
Is it the one that drops rings? Yes? Or jewelry?
I think it might be, yeah. It changed a little bit since early design, so I'm not... so many versions in my head. I'm trying to remember what the current one does.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them out there. I think Smugglers might be the rings. I don't know.
There's also the Corruptor. Maybe it's the Fall Cultist, something. We changed names to that one a bunch. Where the whatever it's possessed has a chance to drop fragments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, drops corrupted items. Yeah.
So overall, like Ziggy, you've played a lot of Torment here. Obviously, the AI of Ghosts is a big issue, and the community overall still feels like they need to be adjusted. You can significantly notice the when they got buffed in terms of naps. You do see them more, but in terms of the AI, you or people in around the office, do you guys feel like the AI does need to be adjusted on those tormented ghosts before it comes into the core of the game?
The Ghost AI is a tricky one. Ideally, we'd have the AI perfect and it would flee from you all the time and it would zip over to the bosses and whatnot. But the way AI works in our game, it's very, very tricky to do. Because, like the monsters, the ghosts have a choice of what they can do. And we sort of weight their choices depending on the situation, but they still have that choice. And that's the case with every monster in the game, which provides... normally it provides a very interesting experience where things don't always play out the same way. You'll have a fight where, a boss will do the same move 3 times in a row or something. But with the ghosts, it can lead to some kind of frustrating gameplay. We keep making additions and changes to the AI system. I don't know if it'll ever be perfect.
I'm probably going to be burnt at the stake for this, but I actually, I think the AI is fine on the Ghost.
Well, patch 1.1.3, or 1.3.1 rather, they changed it to actually, I believe, home in on rares and unique monsters now, right?
That was my only issue with them, that they weren't sticky enough in some cases.
Yeah.
That they kind of would just float over the top of the rare and you'd be like, what? But I really like the fact that it pulses, that you can, that they don't recognize you, then you move and then it pulses and they go in the opposite direction, and then they have that pause again and they'll pulse and they go in the opposite direction. Kind of this pulse AI system thing. It's I'm fine with the idea that sometimes you get a ghost that is in a corner and it doesn't do anything. I mean, sometimes you open lockboxes all the time that don't do anything, but so I don't mind that sometimes ghosts don't do anything either.
Yeah. That pulse thing you're talking about, that's them making a choice.
That makes sense now.
There we go.
And the ghosts are another one, because we have to have them work for all builds. And if you've got a really fast movement speed build, and you can catch up the ghost really quickly, it's going to be a very different experience to a very slow movement speed build. You can't chase something that doesn't pause occasionally if you're really slow. So we have to keep that in mind when we're designing these things.
I think a lot of people were frustrated because they couldn't catch and kill the ghosts, especially early on, but that's not the goal for me when I'm playing and the ghosts are there. The goal is to get them through as many mobs as I can. Killing them is completely secondary. Get them into a raid, get them over as many mobs as possible, and then I would just even if they disappear, it doesn't matter, as long as I got them to tag a bunch of blues or something, I'm happy.
Right, and we also, it would be kind of boring if the first thing you do in this league is kill the special thing you find. It should be, I like the idea of there being a progression where your character at first can't keep up, and then 30 levels later you are able to just barely keep up, and then 30 levels after that you can catch them and kill them.
I do like that too.
I think another thing that people don't take into account is there's many ways you can play around with the ghosts. Like Ziggy said, his goal is to chase them into mobs. Some people do just kill them on the spot. But I remember when I was when I was kind of mid-level, I didn't get too far in Torment. I ran into my friend who ran Ball Cyclone, and we would just try to get as many mobs as possible and then just pull everything in, which is the same regard as it's not really about killing it in that. It's everyone tackles the ghost in a different type of way. But you don't even need movement speed for that. You pull everything to you.
I love it in Torment, man. The loot blender. So awesome. Good.
Now, talking about current leagues and past leagues, without breaking NDA, or unless you want to, or whatever Chris gave you the okay to say, what do you guys do when it comes to making new leagues? How does a drawing board start to something that is Bloodlines?
It really depends. Sometimes it's something that we think the game needs. In the case of the ambush chests, we wanted big explosion chests, but with some sort of trap element. Sometimes it's something that we just ask ourselves what would be a fun and interesting and dynamic experience for the players to go through. In the case of the current 2 leagues, because we didn't have a huge amount of new content, they're a little bit more complicated and there's a bit more depth than there has been in the past. With Act 4 coming up I don't know that they're going to be super complicated. They'll probably be a little bit subtler. They will still change your experience, but because you're going to have a lot more content, we don't want something that's distracting you. So it depends.
Not to mention, because these are the rollover leagues, people are also going to, in the new league, experience, like, so let's say people only play Torment, they're also going to have Bloodlines mobs to play around with in the new season. And so they'll be part of the core game moving forwards.
That's right, yeah. It's very, very likely that a lot of the Bloodline stuff will make it in. So, you know,
we
also don't want to...
Not all, so that's good. That's good.
Well, I'll make sure if Electrolink makes it in. So much.
Please.
I was going to ask, do you guys have any changes you've planned or have in mind for either Torment or Bloodlines to roll them over into the core game?
In terms of changes, with Bloodlines, the whole monster pack system is totally different on the Bloodlines League than it is on the Torment League. You can't really tell, but it is. And so we have to make sure that we can merge that into the core game. Torment, I'm not sure what our plans are for Torment. I suspect it'll probably be something similar to the Rogue Exiles, in that every instance you'll just have a chance, maybe a couple chances to have a ghost appear, and hopefully find a good level at which to start putting ghosts in the game, and they'll probably slowly ramp up in the same way that Exiles do. But yeah, I'm not sure what the concrete plans are yet. I don't know if we have a concrete plan yet.
It's good to know. Obviously, you know, Rampage and Beyond, a lot of people were not too keen on them coming into the core of the game. Map mods, they're fine, but with these new ones, with the exception of maybe P-Link, I think everyone's pretty freaking keen to having them in the core of the game, for sure. I'm still waiting for the day invasion bosses pop out of boxes, where you can roll that on a box. That would be glorious.
Not a bad idea. We can see if we can do that.
Oh, please.
I think it's
thanks,
tormented by Spirit. Yep.
I
would totally want to see that boss
everyone
fight on the
pissed.
boxes. Hell yeah.
It sort of depends on preloading. You know, if you open a chest and there's an exile in there, and everybody hates that because it freezes up for a second.
Right.
Yeah.
Asset loading.
Yeah. If we have bosses in there, that might cause problems.
Oh, you could just put the Leap Slammer with the GMP Fireball. How many of you guys forgot about him?
Oh my!
I like that idea.
Freezes you and then he bear traps you right after the freeze, and then you're dead. Oh, that guy.
I like that idea.
Forgot all about that dude until recently.
Right now.
I do like the introduction on how you guys delayed the mob, so it's like a little pop, 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 pop.
Yep.
That's really nice to see. So there could potentially be, like, I don't know, a boss coming out of like the last take, like maybe a second down the line, kind of like how things are delayed. I don't know. It'd just be interesting. But I really do like that feature.
Yeah, that was a really, really good change. I think it's solved a lot of problems.
Yeah. Even in, like, aside from the lag perspective, just from the perspective of everything spawning at the same time and hitting you at the same time and debuffing you, and it's nice to see, like, I can visually tell, like, okay, like a quarter of a second, half a second, and then they're all up.
Right.
So it's really nice.
On top of that, it makes it a lot harder to just flame blast everything down as soon as it pops. It adds a little bit more depth there as well.
Doesn't change anything for trappers, though.
Shouldn't be flame blasting lockboxes anyway, as I learned.
Yeah, I just... Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember. The one time I alt F4'd.
Oh, man. Well, Nick, I think we're coming up to the end here. Do you guys have any other questions you want to ask Nick before we go into an outro here?
I think I asked both. I had two PvP questions I really wanted to ask, but I think I asked them, so...
Yep.
Thank you for answering those for me.
No worries.
Invasion bosses, boxes. That's a great way to recycle your hard-earned money there, GGG. Let's see it happen. Yes. That'd be so awesome. All right, Nick, thanks for coming on. I must admit, you know, it's hard for GGG employees to come on these kind of things because you guys know about things way in advance, and we never want to pressure you to bust out with any of those things. And it's nice to know how things work. There's a lot of thought process that goes involved that we never hear the middleman of why these things were thought out. So thanks for coming on and disclosing those things for us.
No problem. Thanks for having me on here.
Hey, no problem.
Really appreciate it.
I think that's it. Stay tuned, everybody. We're going to go down for a quick intermission. We're going to set up a 3-person overlay, and then we're going to be discussing the patch changes for patch 1.3.1, as well as the Flame Blast nerf, flasks, as well as the Bloodline changes. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you.